Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here, and today I have a card to share with you using the Succulent Bouquet set, creating a layer of rainbows. So to start off with, I'm going to create the bottom layer, and so I'm taking the image here from the Succulent Bouquet set. This is the larger image in the set, and I'm going to stamp it down onto some cold pressed watercolor paper. I'm using cold pressed here purely just because I like the texture, and I don't particularly need a solid image for this layer. So I'm going to stamp it down with Intens-ified black ink. And ordinarily, if you were going to see this layer, I would stamp this multiple times so that I get a really nice dark impression. But because I don't actually need it, I only need the image just so that I can see where I want to place the colour. I'm not going to do that because you're not going to see it at all. I do want to try and prevent any warping. It didn't actually work. Spoiler alert, it didn't actually work. But what I'm trying to do here is to, in theory, prevent some warping, is to place the image down onto a board, and I'm just using some masking tape here, and I'm just placing that on my top just to remove any excess stickiness so that it'll be easier to take off in the end. And I'm going to use some liquid watercolors here, and I've got a rainbow of colors. I'm using pink, orange, dandelion, pine, deep ocean and purple, and I'm just placing a little dab of that into my plastic palette here. While I'm doing that, I thought I would explain how this card came together. Ordinarily, when I know which stamp set I'm going to use, I come up with a design in my head. Because obviously there's quite a lot of us on the creative team here at Hero Arts, some of our designs do tend to overlap slightly. So what I do is I think about it in my head what design I might want, and then I check to make sure no one's done anything similar. In this case, someone had done something similar to what I thought of. So what I decided to do was just play around with my supplies and see what I came up with. I don't generally do this, but I have to say I did really enjoy it. And as you'll see a little bit later, how the card kind of came together with me playing around. So I've added all of those colours into my palette here, and I do also have a pot of water and a paintbrush to the side. What I'm going to do first is to spray some water onto the panel with the water mist bottle. It looks like I didn't spray that much there, but I did actually spray a fair amount. But I am going to add some water again on top. I was hoping that as soon as I added the colour it was kind of going to wick away. It didn't quite do that. I didn't have as much water on as I thought I did. But when I add the water again on top, like I said, it's going to blend all of the colours together. I want the colour to be around the outside of the succulent image here. So I'm just dabbing on with the paintbrush the different colours. It doesn't have to be neat. In actual fact, it's a lot better if it isn't neat. And then, like I said, when I mist some water over the top again, it's going to blend the colours together. So I'm just kind of going in a rainbow order from the top left hand corner to the bottom right hand corner. That orange is really very strong, and in hindsight I wish that I had kind of diluted it a little bit with some water first, but I didn't in the end. So I'm just going to go through here, and at this point the orange kind of bled into the green, which I really didn't want. I didn't mind it bleeding into the yellow, but I didn't really want it bleeding into the green because that's not going to make a nice colour at all. So I just dabbed some of that off with a paper towel and then went back in with that green. And then I'm going in here with the blue, which is the deep ocean, which is a really pretty blue colour. And then I can add the purple there at the bottom. Then next I'm going to spray it again with the mist bottle, and then ideally at this point you would just walk away and leave it alone and let it dry, but I could it's so annoying, but I just couldn't do it. So I went back in with my paintbrush here and kind of tried to blend some of the colours together. I did have to dab up some of the areas with paper towel again. That orange really was quite bright for my liking, so I did dab up quite a bit of that with the paper towel just to kind of lighten it up. Once the watercolors do dry, they do lighten up slightly, but that orange was still a little bit too vivid for me, and it did bleed quite a bit into the pink. So a little bit later I do go back in and try and remove a little bit of that orange again and add some more pink into it. So I'm kind of just going back and forth here. Like I said, ideally it's probably better just to walk away and leave watercolours. I find you do tend to get the best results that way, but like I said, I just couldn't manage to do it, unfortunately. So just going in here, trying to lighten kind of the edges. I want them to sort of bleed into white more than, and kind of like wick away. Like that's why I liked doing the misting rather than sort of adding the water on top. But like I said, I go back in with the paper towel a little bit and just to kind of lighten up those areas. I want it to look like the succulents are kind of like bursting colour out, and I do think I achieved that in the end. I did lose a bit of the purple, so again I'm going back in with that purple just at the bottom there. And then eventually I decide that I'm going to walk away from it and I let it dry. So at this point it is almost dry, so I'm just going to remove the masking tape from the board here. And then because, like I said, I was really just kind of playing around, I had made one of these earlier, the day before actually, and I really liked how it turned out. So I'm going to use my original one just because it's completely dry at this point, because it's been drying overnight. But it did warp quite a bit, as you can see here. So I did run it through a laminator, and that did help to eliminate quite a bit of the warping. And then I'm also going to die cut it as well, and that's going to help flatten it even more. So I have one of the rectangles here from the Nesting Rectangles Infinity die set, and I want this to be a little bit smaller than an A2 sized card base, because I want to have some of my black card base showing around the edges. It kind of just frames it quite nicely. So I'm just using some low tack tape there, and I run that through my die cutting machine, and that has helped to eliminate the warping. And here is my piece that I had stamped. So I stamped it with Intens-ified black ink onto white cardstock and coloured that with Copic markers, and then cut that out with the Succulent Bouquet frame cuts. And I'm going to place this over the top, and like I said, I think it kind of looks like the colour is bursting out from the succulents. I apologise that I didn't get the colouring on camera. Again, I very much was playing around with this card rather than actually have a design in mind, and I wasn't going to use the colouring on a card. I was just kind of playing around, but in the end I did actually quite like how it turned out. It's not the most perfect colouring, but it does work really nicely with the background, with the watercolour background. So what I did was I cut out 2 more of the frame cuts, and I'm going to lay them all up together, and that's just going to give the piece a little bit more stability. I didn't really want to use foam tape because I want to make sure that I cover up the original image that I used for the watercolouring. But you could colour the initial image with anything you wanted to. You could also just go in on the watercolour piece and just go over the actual succulent image and just colour it darker, and I think that that would look really nice as well. But I quite liked having the white outline on the die cut. So I've just layered those up, and then I'm just going to stamp out the sentiment. This is the Happy Birthday sentiment from the Message Strips Stamp and Cut XL set, and I'm going to stamp that onto some pitch black cardstock. So just closing the misty door here, and then I'm going to prep the cardstock with an anti-static powder tool because I'm going to do some heat embossing. I like to get rid of any excess powder, and then I'm using clear embossing and Watermark ink, and I'm just going to stamp that down, and I do stamp that twice just to make sure that I get a really nice coverage of that sticky ink so that the embossing powder is going to stick nicely to it. And then I can use some detail white embossing powder and just sprinkle that on. And I do like to kind of sprinkle it on, tap off the excess, and then do that a few times, again just to make sure that all of that embossing powder is sticking really nicely to that ink. And then I can heat set that until it's completely melted. And I do like to heat set from the front and the back. That just helps with the warping. And then in the set, you do get the coordinating frame cuts as well. So I'm just using one of those to cut out the sentiment into a strip. So I'm taking some low tack tape, just adhering that down, and then run that through my die cutting machine. And then I'm just going to cut off the excess pieces off the side. I wanted the kind of strip to fit the sentiment perfectly. So just cutting off the excess with a mini guillotine there. This is my panel here. It's nice and flat now, but I am going to add quite a bit of adhesive on the back just in case there is any extra warping. And then I'm going to use the precision glue here just to add a little bit of that onto the back. That helps to give me a little bit of wiggle room just to make sure that I'm going to get that panel straight onto the card base. And that card base is an A2 size card base made from pitch black cardstock. Just using a bone folder here just to make sure that that's stuck down really well, and then I can use that precision glue again to stick the image down onto the card. So just adding small dabs of that onto the back of the image, and then I can place that down on top, and I'm just going to make sure that that's lined up completely so that you don't see any of the black stamping from underneath. And then I'm just going to use some acrylic blocks just to hold that down while the glue dries. Next, I've got my sentiment here, and I've added some foam tape onto one side and then some tape runner on the other, just so that it's going to adhere flat with the card because it's going to overlap the image slightly. So just figuring out where I want that to be. And then once I'm happy, I'm just going to bring in my T-square ruler here just to make sure that that's straight. And then I can press down. And then to finish off the card, I'm taking some black enamel dots from the Neutrals Enamel Dots pack. Just adding a few of those onto the card, and that's just going to bring the black colour in further as well. Just figuring out where I want the last one to be. Decided I quite like it at the top, but it did take me some time. And that's the card finished. I really like I said, how the kind of watercolour looks like it's bursting out from the succulent, and there's quite a bit of dimension on the card as well, popping up that image with the die cuts. Links to the supplies that I used will be in the description bar on YouTube and also over on the Hero Arts blog. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.